Hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to your critique of the week. It's Friday, August 14th. Kids are back in school. The house is quiet. We're looking forward to another exciting round of live workshopping action. Looking at your poems, talking about what works, what doesn't, where we get confused, where we fall in love and cry and weep with joy, all that great stuff. Critique of the week gives a live workshop experience. It's so valuable. And leave as many comments as you can in the chat window as we go through poems. Who do we have here? Winston Munn's here. Darcy's here. We got Dinat Burmia, Young Hegelian, Maribade Carr's here. Good to see you, Maribade. It's been a bit. Vincent Wen is here. Let's see. Leslie Ann Skekterson. I better pull up like a little note so I can write down who's got poems they would like to go over, who is here. If you're here and you have one, please let me know. We'll go over the first 2 or 3 poets who are here that have poems in the queue. Let's see. So Tom Barlow is here. 4 days without power. Tom Power's back, so that's great to hear. That's rough though, 4 days. Winston Munn's got 2. Ryan McCarty's got 2. But we've done Winston Munn and Ryan McCarty not too long ago, so we'll see. We'll think about those. Let's see. Heather Hay is here from the UK. Sheila O'Hearn from Canada. Mary Keating is here. Great to see you, Mary. Let's see. All right. Let's see. Let me scroll down a little bit. Young Hegelian is Michael Washington. Great to know. Good to see you, Michael. Okay, I didn't know that. Let's see. Keisha's here. Lisa Seidenberg is here. Yeah. Let's see. Ritz Battaglini. Michael Washington. We'll see if... Sounds like Michael Washington's got some poems, too. We'll take a look at that. And Vincent Wen. Okay, we'll see. We got some names here to look up. Okay, great. Well, let's start out. Let's try first. Let's try first Michael Washington. And we'll see what we've got. So as always, what we're going to do is talk about the submissions, talk about how we react, where we feel connected to the poem, or where we don't. That's the Keisha Tarbox. Sorry. Young Hegelian is Michael Washington. Okay, Keisha Tarbox. Yeah. Okay, let me fix that. Keisha Tarbox. Okay. So leave as many comments as you can as we talk about these poems. We're going to try to help the poets as much as we can, make the poems better, which makes all of our lives better because we love reading poetry. We love hearing your experiences, getting to see the world through your perspective. Poems are little empathy machines, and the world is a better place if we write better poems and read better poems and get to know each other more as human beings. So, let's start with Keisha. Let me put this in. See what I've got. And, I'm not seeing that submission there. Let's see. Okay. Is it under a different name, Keisha? Looking up these and not seeing... Oh, there we go. Lynn. Okay. Okay, so here we go. Let's take a look at these. We have 2 poems. Between Frankincense and Flower. Maybe it's one poem. Nope. Yeah, Between Frankincense and Flower is the first poem. Let's take a look at this right here. Here we go. Poem number 1. And this is, once again, Keisha from Wisconsin. And here we go. This is Well, I'm not sure. See, this is the one thing that I find myself pointing out frequently, and it happens in submissions pretty regularly too. Is I'm not sure what the title is. I think I think the title is Fractal by Design. Yeah. So the submission is titled that, and then the document is titled Between Frankincense and Flower, and then and then there's no title. So to just put the title within the document, because we actually, especially since for Rattle in particular, but just anywhere, just best practices, the title is part of the poem. So include the title within your poem. Also, yeah, Tambarla says editors often require Times Roman fonts. I don't know. I don't see that as much specifically anymore as it used to be. It used to be the case where when you were submitting manuscripts and it wasn't electronic, and especially for short stories and fiction and prose, the page count and the word count, you had to be able to look at how many pages it was in a manuscript format, and like an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and have a good sense of how long the story actually was, because you couldn't just highlight the text and see how many words it is or whatever. And so the standard is, as PMB is pointing out, 12 point times New Roman. And for prose, it was always double spaced. And I believe it was that if you do that, Times New Roman 12 point double spaced, it's 250 words roughly per page. And that's how people, before there was just word count, that's how, and so that this sort of tradition lives on, even though that's not the case anymore, that we have to do that. But it is sort of using a serif font, makes it a little easier to read. This is a monospaced font, is what you would call it. It is serif. So serifs, if you're wondering, a little lesson in fonts, if you don't know, serifs are the little, at the bottom of each eye, the top and bottom of the eye, there's those little lines. Like some fonts like Arial, you wouldn't have those. The N has little lines, if you notice that. Anything that has sort of a flat end has these little curls and things like that at the end of the characters. And those, like at the bottom of the H, those actually help your eye track as you're reading the line, and sort of make it a little bit of a smoother reading experience, which is why serif fonts are generally better for books. And those include, Times New Roman or Garamond are the most popular. This is Courier, which is, in addition to being a serif font, also a monospace font. So each size of each character is the same, which is why there's so much sort of room around. Like you notice the I and the N here take up about the same amount of space. That's monospaced, and most fonts are not. Anyway, no, it's not confusing. Keisha, I'm just giving a little lesson on fonts. It's okay. But anyway, if you're wondering about that, and then the other is sans serif fonts, means they don't have these little things at the bottom and top, and they tend to be better for titles and things like that. So yeah. But anyway, you do want to make your submissions in, I'd say generally, if you make a poetry submission, a serif font of some kind, Garamond, Times New Roman, something like that. And also, I would sing and include the title within your poem, because it's part of the poem. And also, I would suggest single space. You want the poem to look like it would look in the magazine, not only because it's a sense of how it'll actually look if it's published, but also it sort of feels more like it's published for the editor too. So good deal with that. Yeah. All right, let's move on to the actual poem now. That was just some little side tangent. And again, I'm not sure what the poem's called. Fractal by Design, I believe. But incense and indica rising like myrrh. I think myrrh? You say myrrh? Incense and indica rising like myrrh. Chrism seeps through blunt-wrapped nerves. Ash on my fingers like sackcloth and dirt. Speaking tongues as smoke rings curl. I feel the firmament start to blur. Through frankincense and flower, the covenant burns. There was cherubim coughing in clouds from the pack. Ezekiel's wheels in the curls of the ash, scriptures unsealed in the twist of the wrap. I saw the veil tear, like a flame licking fresh sap. Through a sacrament of green tightly packed, night. And although I didn't mean to pray like that, whatever opened, opened fast. The drape ripped open, and I leaned back as I dropped to my knees, still clutching my dime-sized sack. And when my awestruck soul remained intact, and no trumpet sounded when it cracked, no seraphim rushed in through the gap, and the world didn't end, it didn't react, I knew my Maker just blessed me with a moment like that. So as the upturned curtain found its mend, the incense burned down low again. The smoke thinned out against the fan, my chalice cooled against my skin, and my breath came back the way it can. And as every saint and sinner meets an end, the ceremony closed where it began. I ache, then rest my praying hand like Mary, holding space again. For Magdalene, witness, whispers a botanical hymn, and a sacred rotation is where the awakening breathes in. And the green-tended faithful can exhale, free of their sin. Watch the heavens unfold and the sacred rites spin. Every bloom is a gift, a righteous tool made forbidden by thrones built of power that want to keep magic hidden. One does not discover divine revelation through unintentional smoke and righteous inhalation. The flower itself is a God-given right and an invitation unto remembrance and sacred contemplation. For the flame, the haze, and holy sensation are within you like God and salvation. Yeah. PNB says, when you stare into the abyss stares back. Yeah. Let's see. Nancy Shell says, I would omit the word fresh before sap to keep the rhythmic flow uniform. So the thing that I like about this poem is that there's a nice sense of musical rhythm. Occasionally it gets into being a little too forced. But as Winston Munn's saying right now, for the most part, the rhyme is handled well. I love that when there's the slant rhymes, you don't want the rhymes to be, so obvious, and by using enjambment and sort of slant rhymes and sort of moving around, you want you don't want the usually in most cases, sometimes it can be different, but in most cases you want the storytelling and what's going on in the poem to be at the front of your awareness, and the music and the rhymes to kind of be in the background a little bit. And sometimes when the rhymes get too many true rhymes end stopped at the end, it gets to be a little bit too much. A few times it felt like the rhymes were going, the lines were being written toward the rhyme instead of letting yourself be surprised by the poem and going to an unexpected place. So the I don't know, the strength I think is the sounds, but sometimes the sound gets a little too far. Dick Westheimer says, great sound play, but full of cliches. I want the images to be as fresh as the music. And that's the other thing, too. And the third thing I was going to say is the next comment here. Seems preachy at the end. I'm sorry for the pun, Danette Bermia. But yeah, so we get... So we should pull out some of the cliches, all the cliches. We don't want cliches because that doesn't trigger anything in our minds. It's not like new connections. It's sort of old stuff we've already got rattling around up there. We want new, make it new, as Rapound said. Yeah. Ryan McCarty points out the rhythm is really solid in some places too. The frankincense and flower, the covenant burns made me take a bit of a breath right there. Yeah. Winston Munn says, I listen to the sounds and the rhythms, but I have no idea what the poem is about. Well, it's about getting high on the old Mary Jane as a kind of quasi-religious experience, I'd say. But it does, so let's, it's a bit of a long poem. I'm not sure I should read through the whole thing again, but let's, I guess I should. We'll point out the cliches, because that's an issue. We'll point out the parts where the poem... The rhymes start to feel forced a little bit, and we need to vary the rhythm and the shape and where it's working in that case. So here we go. Incense and indica rising like myrrh. And indica is one of the two main sort of types of marijuana. I can't remember which one, and actually I didn't even know what the other one is, but one's like more drowsy and one's more like like I don't know what, like hallucinatory, I guess. Or stimulating, I guess, is the opposite of drowsy. Anyway, incense and indica rising like mere chrysoms seep through blunt wrapped nerves. I'm not even sure what that word is. Chrism. Let me look that up. Chrism is a consecrated, sweet-smelling oil made from a blend of olive oil and fragrant perfume, like balsam. Okay, so you learn something every day. Chrism seeps through blunt-wrapped nerves, ash on my fingers like sackcloth and dirt. So I like the way here we have the myrrh and the dirt. Like, see how that's... and then curl, too. Like, these are slanty kind of rhymes. They're close linguistically, but different too, and that makes the poem feel sort of natural. I like it when it's doing that, and some parts that's personal taste. Personally, I really like slant rhyming a lot. I like that sort of twist on that variety, in addition to the repetition. I find really pleasing myself. Speaking tongues as the smoke rings curl. I feel the firmament start to blur through frankincense and flower. The covenant burns. I'm going to get the blur, the burns. There was a cherubim coughing in clouds from the pack. Ezekiel's wheels and the curls of the ash. Again, pack and ash. Like, those are the kind of things we want to do. Especially so when you don't have a meter. You have a rhyming poem that's not metered. It tends to work really well with free verse, because otherwise you sort of really get to being sort of sing-songy naturally if you don't have like a strong meter to push against. And so it tends to be, especially with shorter lines and free verse, if you're going to have rhymes, it's good to have slant rhymes. And I like that aspect of it. So Ezekiel's wheels and the curls of the ash, scriptures unsealed and the twist of the rap. I mean, in ash and rap is even a slant line. Let me get sap there too. I saw the veil tear. And here's the first sort of... I was going to say too, I like the introduction because we have these religious... it becomes a sort of religious experience toward the end is what the poem ends up being about. And we have that introduced here with Ezekiel's wheels too, and the cherubim, of course. Mary Keating says this poem has a nice chanting feel. It does falter a bit, which can be tightened by deleting some words. Yeah. And Brian O'Sullivan says, I like the firmament, frankincense, flower alliteration. Yeah, that's nice too. Good, it's just good sounds. It's a poet with an ear for poetry, an ear for the music. Scriptures unsealed and the twists of the rap. I saw the veil tear. And of course, the tearing of a veil starts to be a little cliche. And then a flame licking is pretty cliche too. So those are kind of things I would avoid, those kind of phrases. A veil tearing and a flame licking. Those are just, if it's a flame, it's licking is one of the things you just see it doing all the time, even though it's a metaphor. You don't even think of it as a metaphor because it's used so often. I saw the veil tear like a flame licking fresh sap. And I agree. I think Mary Keating originally said cutting this fresh. It's one too many syllables, and the line's even longer than most. It feels off, having that extra, a little clunky. Through a sacrament of green tightly packed. Yeah, sacrament of green is a cool phrase too. So what you want to have are phrases like sacrament of green, which you've never heard before or probably haven't, and not flame licking and veil tearing. See how that's like one is new and one's not. And although I didn't mean to pray like that, whatever opened fast. And so up to this point, I think the poem is working pretty well. Shape of Soup says, I appreciate that the narrative itself is logically coherent, definitely a bit cliche forced and descriptively dense, but having something explicit to say is a quality a lot of submitted poetry lacks. Completely agree. Yeah. Nancy Tinnell says, I wonder how all these lines would work divided into 3 sections, a triptych, like the religious triptych paintings. That's interesting. Okay. Yeah. Let's see. And the poet, Keisha, says, thank you for helping me understand the cliches. Yeah, I mean, the problem with cliches, and I don't know if I explained it completely, is that these are already metaphors and ideas and concepts that our mind as readers, or everybody's mind as a culture, has already bundled together. There's a constellation of stars, you can imagine. And it's one that's already been named and we just see Orion, and we don't even notice that it's sort of stars anymore. That's the thing about a cliche. It's already chunked. It's already, if one little neuron fires, the rest fire in the same way. It's the same pattern we've already had. And what you want to do with poets or creative writers or anything to spark someone's imagination is to make new constellations, new connections in our minds where those kind of ideas flourish, and we get to name a new constellation, and that ends up staying with us. And that's why fresh metaphors are so valuable in poems, why we have the Neil Postman Award for Metaphor, because they're so rare. But as Neil Postman said, metaphors are not ornaments, they're instruments of understanding. Is that the phrase? Instruments of perception. I guess that's how he said it. But so we want to have those. We want to have those tools for really lodging deep in somebody's mind. And the one of the best ways to do that, a story that's unforgettable does that, but a metaphor that's new and actually functions and works right and unlocks a connection. Metaphor, the word itself means to carry over. It takes a concept from one spot to another. It carries that concept over. And if there's a new metaphor that does that, then we're changed. Like, our perception of the world is forever changed by having a new metaphor there in our minds. And that's why poems or writing often sticks with us, because we have that. Okay, anyway, continuing. And although I didn't mean to pray like that, whatever opened fast. The drape ripped open, and I leaned back as I dropped to my knees. And so, still, I think the whatever opened fast. I'm still long on board up to this point. The drape ripped open, and I leaned back. It feels both. It's one too many opens, and I feel like it's getting a little redundant. I think it's getting a little bit. I think where the poem could start to be tighter up, start to be tightened up and moved a little more quickly by cutting some stuff. And it feels like that's a little too much. Of like repeating the same kind of thing. As I dropped to my knees, still clutching my dime-sized sack. There's one part, still clutching my dime-sized sack. It's because it's that, 3 stressed syllables in a row, dime-sized sack. It sort of doesn't have the same music as the rest of the poem and felt off to me. Yeah. Tom Barlow says, dime-sized sack is confusing as the size of a weed quantity. Yeah. Oh, and Dick Westerholm points out, drop to my knees is another cliche. Yeah. Nice. Flew right over that one. PMB, maybe our expert in such things, says dime is $10 worth, which I did not know either, because I'm a dime bag. I only buy the kilos. No. The drape ripped open, and I leaned back as I dropped to my knees, still clutching my dime-sized sack. And when my awestruck soul, and then, soul, it's not really cliche. What it is melodramatic, which is a slightly different thing. But still, Winston Munn says, cliche alert would make for a good app. It definitely would. But my awestruck soul remains intact. The problem with things like soul, things like bleeding, things like tears, is they're not earned. Like, they don't, like, we need to feel soul shifting things. If you're gonna bring up a soul, we need to be made to feel tears. I'm not told that it's tearful. Like, there's a way that just conjuring the word doesn't do enough. And that's the case with soul. It just doesn't actually have the effect that you want when you evoke certain things like tears and blood and souls. Those are things they're categories that are high concepts or common emotions that are very general and we sort of all experience and have a thing with. But you have to create that feeling. You have to evoke that in us, not tell us. So having your soul be awestruck, we need to feel awestruck in our souls, and so saying it, and that's why it feels like instead of drama, melodrama, when you pull out words like that. So it's not quite cliche, although sometimes there's cliches with soul, so that gets a bit confusing, but it's a similar kind of thing, but a little different. When my awestruck soul remained intact and no trumpet sound when it cracked, no seraphim rushed in through the gap, and the world didn't end, it didn't react. I don't know, there was bordering on these rhymes here being a little bit too forced for me. I like the cracked, gapped. I really liked where we didn't have a rhyme on end, because that broke up because we had tracked, cracked, gap, react. It's just, and sack. Like, it's a really long riff of very similar sounds, and it edges on like too many in a row where it starts to feel monotonous. I think a little bit more variation in how you do this a slant rhyme at the end would help that. And the end breaks it up, but there's not. It probably should be a little less. I think it's one too many. It didn't react. I knew my maker just blessed me with a moment like that. So as the upturned curtain found its mend, and this line strikes me as I know, a little strange. I'm not sure. It's a strange way to describe. The upturned curtain found its mend. I think I kind of know what you mean, but it feels kind of, it's a bit of a leap, or like a stretch, you know? Because it's not literally true, but it's also like a figurative leap too far. For you yourself being mended, your awareness kind of coming back down from the high or whatever. The incense burned down low again. The smoke thinned out against the fan. I like when we go to the smoke thinned out against the fan, because it's a very real, tangible within the room thing. And I think we're at risk of getting a little bit too philosophical and heady. And so this pulls us back into the room. My chalice cooled against my skin. My breath came back the way it can. These three lines strike me as a little weak too. The smoke thin against the fan is very concrete and visual, and we're there. The chalice, I'm having trouble imagining it being a chalice or how that would look right. And then it cooling against your skin is fine, but then my breath came back the way it can is pretty vague and doesn't evoke a whole lot. As every saint and sinner meets an end, the ceremony closed where it began. I like that line, the ceremony closed where it began. I ache. And again, the ache is the melodrama. Then rests my praying hand, like Mary holding space again. So we have to be made to feel the ache. Like why do you ache? And how does it feel? And and it's a good place to try to think of a metaphor that would fit to make that come to life, because it has that flat melodrama kind of feel. For a Magdalene witness whispers a botanical hymn, and here's where we get to. The poem gets too sort of preachy to me and sort of generalizing and sort of summing up what we're done. Like in a poem, we want to go on the journey with you. Like it's a map for your journey of exploration and your imagination and consciousness, and we want to be going there with you. We don't want to be told what you're doing, like what we should take from it. We want to experience it directly and not as a summary of what happens, and we don't want to be told how to feel or what we should take away from the poem. We want it to be a direct experience, and that's the way it has the most power for us. And so the poem up to this point feels, mostly, except for the little melodramas and some cliches that Dick's graciously pointing out. Besides for that, the poem's really holding our attention and doing well to stay within the moment and share that experience. But then toward the end here, it gets a little bit too much of that. So whispers a botanical hymn and a sacred rotation is where the awakening breathes in. So see how much this is like a summary and sort of a pontificating on what we've already experienced. It just doesn't add much to our experience to hear this kind of thing. And the green-tended faithful can exhale, free of their sin. Watch the heavens unfold and the sacred rites spin. And here's one of the ones where the rhyme feels a little bit forced. It's too easy to go from sin to spin, and it feels like we're just sort of spinning our own tires, ironically, and not really going anywhere in this section. Every bloom is a gift, and every bloom is a gift, and that's one of the things I think it was Winston Munn said. The poem feels preachy at the end. This is every bloom is a gift is very much just telling us what we should take away from the poem instead of just letting the poem be itself. A righteous tool made forbidden by thrones built of power that want to keep magic hidden. If you want to get like the concept of this, which is ends up in it's a, sort of a political, philosophical, political space or something. We have to enact that within the poem again and not be told, what to be. It's an additional thought on top of it. Leslie Ann Skechers says, I fell out of the poem here. Yeah. Anyway, one does not discover divine revelation through intentional smoke and righteous inhalation. The flower itself is a God-given right and an invitation unto remembrance and sacred contemplation. And again, and we get the inhalation, temptation, invitation. It's a little too much of this rhymes too. So it's too heavy-handed with the rhymes at the end as well. But I would cut so much, and I was looking at let's see, the smoke thinned out against the fan, my chalice cooled against my skin, and my breath came back the way it can. And again, this is a weak line. I wouldn't do that. But I'm trying to find, I felt like there were some lines that you could end there on that image. And as every saint and sinner meets an end, the ceremony closed where it began. Maybe it was there. Or maybe like Mary holding space again. Like somewhere around here felt like it could be the ending of the poem. And this rest was the preachy stuff. Yeah. NMS says, why rhyme? Would this poem work? If not rhymed poem, would it work? And the weakness for me is the ending. I don't understand this. Like, why rhyme? like why not rhyme? Why write a poem at all? Why why anything? I mean, rhymes make poems memorable. It's a kind of music. Some people enjoy it more than others. But the whole oral tradition of what poetry is, rhyme is central to that, and internal rhyme and the rhythms of language repeating. Poetry is the dance of sound within our mouths, our tongue within the dance floor of our palate, and why dance? Exactly. Why anything? And having rhymes, having them sort of regular and shown visibly by having them at the end of the lines instead of internally hidden, which a lot of poems do, is a choice, and it's a way to make them more upfront, and sometimes it's good. I mean, sometimes it's not. Danny Mess asking, would it work without the rhyme? I don't know. I mean, the journey, the topic is interesting enough. It has all the same problems, whether it rhymes or not. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway. The question says, cliches were so hard for me to pick out in my work early on. I discovered how loaded my poems were with time when Tim critiqued a poem of mine on Critique of the Week on a lightning round when he picked out Elixir. That's interesting. Okay. Well, let's move on to the next poem, and we'll see. And we might, if it's longer, we might start to be, oops, hang on a second. Submittable sometimes. Uh-oh. We don't need music. It's not over yet. Don't worry, everybody here. Sometimes Submittable doesn't like me to load. Okay, here we go. Second poem, again from Keisha, and it's about the same length, but the lines are short. We'll go through it. This is called Solstice Pole, I think. Again, I'm not sure what the title is. I guess the title of the whole submission was Fractal by Design, so it's confusing. And Dick Westermer says, too, rhyme can drive discovery and surprise. Exactly, that's how it works. That's why rhyming poets love meter and rhyme. Because it draws you into unexpected places. You think about words you wouldn't have thought of, and they sort of come out of your subconscious, and then the poem is shaped in ways you wouldn't expect. Okay. You didn't find me by mistake or need or catch me when I fell. You met me at a fracture point the cosmos knew too well. I was a damsel out of time, my life misaligned and spun. You arrived like gravity, keeping me grounded while undone. A quiet force that held my center before my body learned to run. My orbit formed without instruction, already falling toward its sun. I think I'm going to talk as we go a little bit because we're a little later. We were slow with that poem. So here there's a da 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 da, and then it rhymes rhythm, and it's already feeling a little redundant to me. You didn't find me by mistake or need. or catch me when I fell. You met me at a fracture point the cosmos knew too well. I was a damsel out of time, my life mislined and spun. You arrived like gravity, keeping me grounded and well undone. You know, there's a... Because you end up having the same length sentences, all ending on a full-stop rhyme, it becomes the phrase is sing-songy, what we talk about. It starts to feel like a nursery rhyme and not like an adult poem, you know? Flame name, it becomes too regular. And there's a really great, very, very early Rattlecast with Jamie Hecht, where I remember him saying, "Farm the corn." But he talks about the actual, in your neurophysiology, why, you know, setting up an expectation and then having it change slightly releases these hits of dopamine and serotonin that we experience as pleasure. And when you're trying to acquire language for the first time, having really monotonous, regular rhyming really helps the kid understand how to read and hear music and language and speak too. You know, that's why we have nursery rhymes. But as you get older, it starts to feel monotonous when you do that because we already have that. Yeah, it's too close to perfect meter, says Chelsea McClellan, without following good meter practices. That's a good way to put it. And good meter practices are having variation within the meter. It was Rena Espaillat in our conversation. I guess it was on the Poetry Space. That's Katie Dozier's show that we do just visual. I think maybe that was, or audio. I think that's where she was talking about it. But we did that in the Still Life series, in the summer issue of Rattle, the current issue still. There's a segment with Rena Espaillat. There's 5 of her formal poems, but she describes she calls it a box to dance within, is what a form is. And it's having those constraints of a certain structure that you can change and move around and have a variety of movements within this structure that make that's pleasurable and why they make it a dance. And so she's the dancer in a box. And the problem here is instead of like dancing within the box, we're just like following the outline of the box over and over and over and over again. And, you know, so it ends up feeling like one of those sad wolves at the zoo that just runs the fence line and does nothing else all day. It's monotony. What we want to have is a lot of variation within that structure. So you set up a structure and then you vary within it. The first poem didn't have as regular meter like this, and it also had slant rhymes like we were talking about, and that's one of the ways you can help variation. But the main thing is you don't want all sentences the same length. You want to have variety of syntax within your sentences so that we have both the constraint of the box and then some freedom of movement within the box, and that's what we really experience as pleasure through the music of speech. Anyway, let's continue. The world kept missing our exact coordinates by name. Then something shifted, seasons bent, the hour learned to speak. I like that phrase, the hour learned to speak. You stepped into the space I'd kept for someone I would meet. You didn't shine to catch my eye or ask my heart to choose. You altered mass. You changed the field. The rest I couldn't lose. So one thing to point out, I think this is wonderful, for somebody who has an ear and is starting out writing poetry but has a real ear for it and picks up on the sounds and the dance of language. This is a great start. And I think having poems that are too regular is like the first step to having poems that have meter and have a real sense of that, with also the variety that's pleasurable and sophisticated and memorable in the contemporary era. So I think it's a good first start. And if you look back at when I was writing, metrical poems at the very beginning of writing them, I was writing in this way too. And I think it's a good. This is sort of what the natural ear that you develop for poetry does in its first step. And now we want to have a lot of variety and play with ways we can vary. You set up an expectation, then you shift and adjust and pull away. And there's a dance of like how far stretched and how close we come back and forth to that regular that regular meter and that beat. Chelsea McClellan says that, and not just variation from the iams, but modulation of different levels of iams. So it's not always very weak, very strong. Yeah, like it's like a, here the meter in this poem is like a marching kind of cadence, which is what an iam. It's a ba-dum 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 ba-dum. It's like you're a horse galloping or something. and it's just a consistent straight gallop, and it's like 5 or 10 paces every line in the ballad form, and it's just over and over, and we move dump, 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 it just becomes very monotonous. We want to have a lot of variety within that, and that's where the pleasure comes from. Tom Barlow says, reading poetry is always the best way to develop an ear. Totally true. I love, I think I even pulled up To Earthward by Robert Frost last week, maybe. But read a lot of Robert Frost, read poets like that, who sort of modernize and work within meter really well. Rena Ayaspiat's a great poet for how to feel natural and how to have a voice that sounds natural while also being metrically fluid. So there's all that, but yeah. Anyway, let's see. Where were we? My life misaligned and spun. You arrived like gravity, keeping me grounded well and done. A quiet force that held my center before my body learned to run. My orbit formed without instruction, already falling toward its sun. My circle once is almost due. Same air, same borrowed flame. The world kept missing our exact coordinates by name. Then something shifted, seasons bent, the hour learned to speak. You stopped into the space I'd kept for someone I would meet. So here we do, just talking about the variety, like this is one way to break up, and mix and have some variety too, by having that short sentence fragment, having some short sentences, some long sentences, and just in prose writing, if you're writing fiction or any kind of writing, you'll be advised to vary your sentence length, and that helps break up the monotony too. You stepped into the space I'd kept for someone I would meet. You didn't shine to catch my eye or ask my heart to choose. Again, the heart is that sort of melodrama and cliche. You altered mass, you changed the field, the rest I couldn't lose. Like space-time folding under weight, my chaos found its shape. Well, I think we're going to move on because we've went along on this topic, but we're good. So thanks so much for sharing this, Keisha Lynn from Wisconsin, sharing these two poems. Really great ear. We're gonna pick up classical poetry. Yeah, Frost is great. Chelsea lists some more poets that she should read, given that. But yeah, let's move on to another poet that we want to make sure we save time for other people too. We'll do Ritz Battaglini next. We'll mark this as discussed and see what we've got. Oop. Oh, come on. Hang on one second. We want... Here we go. Okay. Oh, Rita Battaglini. Okay, here we go. So Rita Battaglini from New Jersey sent these poems. Some questions. I'm relatively new to writing. I need help with punctuation. The way I read my poems doesn't fit the punctuation I select. Thanks for considering these. Okay. And so we have two relatively short poems, I believe, to look at here from Rita. Let's take a look. From alienation to home. Mind in another world, half asleep my thoughts, perhaps wishes are of a life there. As I drift off, perception falling overtakes me, a silent soundtrack to which my gyroscopic motion is in sync with. Moving quickly now to a destination that I have wondered about my whole life. An unknown gateway opens up. Is this science fiction, a dream, or a new reality? I come to, overwhelmed and disoriented, far away from all and who I know. Here I barely know myself, unable to speak, my physical form altered, no identifiable features per se. I am wispy gossamer clouds that shift and change with solar winds, alone in the desolate vast expanse of the Milky Way galaxy. Unexplained phenomena occur simultaneously. Your birth anniversary aligns with a Perseid meteor showers. I don't believe in coincidence. I feel your presence, but I cannot explain it. But you are here with me briefly. I want to bathe myself in your essence. You are dazzling. You are bright fireballs. A cosmic revelation is divulged. You are the only home I have known. You are now racing toward Earth. I followed you. When I hear oohing and eyeing, brought back to Earth on a dark beach along with others, you are with me, watching the meteor showers. While the truth may be out there for others, reality is I'm right here. Sorry, I'm right where I am supposed to be, next to you. Yeah. So Chelsea McClellan, by the way, says Rena Espaillat, Matthew Buckley Smith, Shane McCrae, George David Clark. Yeah, great poets we publish frequently, except for Shane McCrae. I think he's one of those who's like never sent us poems. Yeah, it'd be great if he did. I love Shane McCrae. Anyway, Winston Munn says, did you wake up as a gigantic insect? How many legs and how do you get off its back? So for this poem, I'm trying. Mine Another World, half asleep, my thoughts. This is one of those ones where I'm having trouble feeling grounded. I'm having trouble feeling how to connect with what's going on. I'm half asleep, my thoughts, perhaps wishes, are of life there. So in this other world, to another world. As I drift off, perception falling overtakes me. A soundtrack to which my gyroscope motion is in sync with. A silent soundtrack to which my gyroscopic motion is in sync with. Moving quickly now. Yeah, Winston Munn says Kafka used details. And so the thing is, I think this poem, it falls under... So we have this dream frame where we have, we're falling asleep. We have this dream. But there's not enough concrete details to bring it to life. I think, Winston Munn says Kafka used details. And if you go read, here, actually, let's pull it up. I'm sure that's easy to find online in full text, right? Project Gutenberg's got it. But it's like an EPUB? No, here we go. This is translated by David Wiley. Here we go. One morning when Gregor Samsa woke from troubled dreams, he found himself transformed in his bed into a horrible vermin. Sorry, this is a huge... Maybe if I... Is this... okay, sorry. Can I fit this on the screen? Yeah, there we go. One morning when Samsa Gregor woke from troubled dreams, he found himself transformed in his bed into a horrible vermin. He lay on his armor-like back, and if he lifted his head a little, he could see his brown belly, slightly domed and divided by arches into stiff sections. See all that? Like Gregor Samsa, we have a name, which is a detail, even though it's a abstract detail. Awakened from dreams. It's like the first clause. But then he found himself transformed into a horrible vermin, which is a bit of an abstraction, but we're getting toward detail. And then he lay on his armor-like back, think of the armor-like back, how detailed and precise and concrete that is. And if he lifted his head a little, he could see his brown belly, slightly domed, divided by arches into stiff sections. So how much can you see that? How much can you become Gregor Samsa? Look down at your own belly and see that, We feel like we're there because we, human beings, are visual creatures. We moved out of the woods, developed eyes so we could see snakes and fruit in the distance. And that's the way that we process things, where so much of our processing is visual. And so much of our brain is devoted to that, and things stick, and we see the world. We're sort of constantly making this world, imaginary world that we're projecting into ourselves at all times. But that's how we function. It's very easy to slip inside Gregor Samsa's bed. And that's what we want to do. We want to conjure up a world that we, the reader, can slip inside. And that means saying things like brown belly, slightly domed and divided by arches into stiff sections. The bed was hardly able to cover it and seemed ready to slide off at any moment. His many legs, pitifully thin compared with the size of the rest of him, waved about helplessly as he looked. I mean, like we're there in that scene because of those concrete details. That's why concrete details are so important. And that's why they bring us into the experience. We talked about poetry earlier today, being an experience of empathy. They're an empathy machine. We enter the voice of the poet, enters our body, we become the speaker, and we experience that experience. We walk in their shoes, and we do it through mostly that concrete imagery that gets us to having that shared experience. And so in this poem, we don't have that, and it's why it's really hard to connect. We have the dream as a frame, but then we don't have that sense. The descriptions that exist are very abstract and don't conjure up the space that we can enter like that. So a silent soundtrack to which my gyroscopic motion is in sync with, moving quickly now to a destination that I have wondered about my whole life. An unknown gateway opens. There's a science fiction, a dream, new reality. See how there's not a single specific detail in the way that there was that segmented belly of in Metamorphosis, you know? How far do we have to read before we get something specific like that? I come to overwhelmed, disoriented, and far away from all I know and from all and who I know. Here I barely know myself and able to speak, my physical form altered, but like altered how? No identifiable features per se. I'm a wispy gossamer. It's a bit of tangible detail, but still what it's describing tangibly is intangibility. That shift and change with the solar winds, which is again, even abstraction with that. An alone and desolate, vast expanse. And so we don't get so if we're going to, we have to enter a space. We need concrete details. In real estate, it's location, location, location. In writing, it's details. Concrete imagery. We need that so we can attach and feel connected to the poem. Lisa Seidenberg says Kafka uses vermin as at the time in German was an epithet for Jews, which is very pointed commentary. That's interesting. Actually, I didn't know that. I never read anything about Metamorphosis. I've only just read it. Diamantino says mystery lives in the gaps between facts, not in the vagueness of a mist world. Yeah, exactly. Really, really well put. The magic is the interstices of our understanding. Anyway, let's look at the other poem, and because that's just details. You start there, create a space we can enter, and then we can talk about what we're doing while we're there. Let's see what the other poem does. A mother's belief. Love brought you into this world. The hope was that love would be enough to see you through. A mother's inner voice telling her it would be time. Would there be enough of it to guide you? You had more your own inner voice than more than one voice. Too many voices crowded you out, the boy born out of love. Unlike others, when you left home, you became lost, never found. So the same thing is happening here. And we need details. You were found, we have this runs on things, but we have no sense of where we are, where the speaker is, what's going on, what can we connect with, how can we make a world inside our minds as we speak this poem that you're presenting us sort of the sheet music for. So let's, ground us in details. Rita asked about punctuation. This is an unpunctuated poem. The other, I guess there's a comma here, but it's mostly unpunctuated. My advice about punctuation is to just use regular punctuation like you would in prose. Varying it. We want to have punctuation be consistent, first of all, but punctuation, the rules, as it were, of punctuation are only to help people read and understand sentences better. Commas are pauses in a specific spot that allow us to see where the clauses are of sentences so we can map the syntax together. Periods tell us how to end the sentence. The question marks tell us to rise with inflection so we know it's a question. They're little road signs that tell us, where to stop, where's a yield, where how things connect, that there's a T intersection coming up, that's what punctuation is. And the conventions of punctuation just make it easier to read and comprehend text and make it easier to match with actual speech. So just use actual conventions of prose. Don't say, oh, it's poetry, so I don't have to punctuate, or I can do whatever I want and vary it. It just makes it harder to read. It makes it feel, you're asking too much of us, and they're not mature. I mean, frankly, to vary punctuation. Just use regular punctuation. If you're not going to use punctuation, there aren't that many poems that work well without using punctuation. W.S. Merwin has a whole run of books where he was working with no punctuation. There's some poems in Rattle throughout the history that have no punctuation that work fine. I've written unpunctuated poems myself that they have some sonnets and things. I have those train poems I do. There's ways you can do it, but that's sort of a whole separate topic. And I would just use regular punctuation. Let's see. Dry Montito says, if a poem is punctuated, I hear the voice of a poet speaking. If a poem is unpunctuated, it is possible to see it as a voiceless image. That's interesting too. Yeah. PNB says, E. Cummings is a guy who uses unconventional punctuation to control the reader. Yeah, it's true. And when you have, I think E. Cummings is a great poet. And, sorry, I lost my train of thought. But yeah, E. Cummings is a great poet, but his play with punctuation, it's sort of like a master painter. Somebody who, I'm terrible at the contemporary. Who's the one? Is it like Kooning or someone who does very simple color lines? But if you have to have the skill to be able to do more too in order to know what you're manipulating. Otherwise, it's just a sort of cheap knockoff of what it is. And it's so easy to do a cheap knockoff of E. Cummings that his entire reputation, I think, has been killed by students doing, playing with punctuation, not really understanding what they're doing, and just wrecking the concept of it. So, yeah. Oh, yeah, Temperless says this is a sans serif font that Tim was talking about before. Yeah, this is like an Arial-looking font. I'm not sure if it is Arial, actually. I think it's... maybe it is. But this is what, when you paste poems in to Submittable, this is what they give you. And it's not Arial, I'm not sure what it is, but it's a sans serif font, and that's what we mean. There's not those, see, look at the bottom of the N, there's not those little serif marks that help guide your eye and sort of feel like there's a line even though there's not. It's almost like the serif fonts make sort of like a dotted line, like it's almost like lined paper when you have those little serifs at the bottom of each letter. And when they don't, you don't have that, which makes it just not as pleasant and easy to read because your eye doesn't like sort of guide down. Let's see. I wonder. I think we'll wrap up with that for that poem. Do we want to say more? Is there anything else you want to say about this? A mother's innate intuition. Maybe I should just read the whole thing. That no matter what she would know if you were okay, a mother's love couldn't keep you safe. A knock on the door from a stranger, a person in uniform, forever changed a mother's belief. So here we get some of the story. And then there's a knock on the door, which is sort of a bit cliche for what's going on. But this is a poem that, if we could bring this moment to life with detail, like what did the door feel like? Here, let me do another poem. Well, I'll finish reading this, then I'll share another poem. A knock on the door from a stranger, a person in uniform, forever changed a mother's belief. You were found, but you did not find your way home, which is a nice line. If it was full of, if there were details all over the place, and then we got this, you were found, but you did not find your way home. That's a nice line. Time ran out. But see, again, we don't have the detail. Let me pull up a poem. This is one of those classic Rattle poems, and I'm sure we've shared it many times. On the Critique of the Week, but probably not for a while. This is a similar knock at the door, but notice how much, just notice the detail and how everything is brought to life through the detail because we get to enter the space. The voice is a believable voice. It feels like somebody who's honest, authentically talking to us in regular speech patterns, in that regular dance of just natural speech. But it has these details that bring the poem to life, that make us feel like we're the speaker, and then we're full of emotion at the end of the poem because of that. And this is just how it's done. This is Tony Gloagler's 1969. And it's the same knock at the door story, but look at the details. Pay attention to how much the details make this poem come to life, and because it's alive, make you feel the emotion at the end of the poem. Okay? 1969. My brother enlisted in the winter. I pitched for the 6th grade Indians, and coach said I was almost as good as Johnny. My mother fingered rosary beads, watched Cronkite say, and that's the way it is. I smoked my first and last cigarette. My father kept his promise, washed Johnny's Mustang every weekend. Brenda Whitson taught me how to French kiss in her basement. Sundays, we went to 10 o'clock Mass, dipped hands in holy water, genuflected, walked down the aisle, and received communion. Cleon Jones got down on one knee, caught the last out, and the Mets won the World Series. 2 white-gloved Marines rang the bell, stood on our stoop. My father watched the car pull away, then locked the wooden door. I went to our room, climbed into the top bunk, pounded a hardball into his pillow. My mother found her Bible, took out my brother's letters, put them in the pocket of her blue robe. My father started Johnny's car, revved the engine until every tool hanging in the garage shook. Yeah, so Dick says that's one of my favorite poems. It's such a great poem. But notice how it's those details. You know, we have this list of things that happened in 1969, and we're moving through a list, but each one has specificity to it. So my brother enlisted in the winter, and it's almost like that's put so casually that you almost forget. You know, my brother enlisted in the winter. I pitched for the 6th grade Indians, and coach said I was almost as good as Johnny. You know, it's not just I pitched in Little League or something. You know, I pitched for the 6th grade Indians. There's that specificity. And it's what coach said. We introduced the brother Johnny through that dialogue, but it's all that detail. And Johnny, too, himself, the name is part of the detail that we're given. Then my mother fingered her rosary beads. So you don't just see them, you feel them, because she fingered her rosary beads. Watch Cronkite say, and that's the way it is. So we have her, you have this little scene in just my mother, one figure, fingering her rosary beads, so one really precise detail, and then Cronkite, who's on the TV, saying, and that's the way it is. So we have this worrying mother watching the nightly news, the CBS News, and Cronkite in the room. The whole thing comes to life because we have those 3 little details. I smoked my first and last cigarette, which pulls it back to the speaker again to remind us that we're not talking just about the mom, but the whole situation. My father kept his promise, washed Johnny's Mustang every weekend. Brenda Whitson taught me how to French kiss in her basement. Sundays, we went to 10 o'clock Mass, dipped hands in holy water, genuflected, walked down the aisle, and received communion. So again, we're a little list of things. You know, we're given this little scene with Brenda in her basement. It's not just taught me how to French kiss, it's in her basement. You know, it seems like that detail might not matter, but that makes the one sentence, it takes it from a sentence into a whole scene. So then we get these little scenes like we're watching a snapshot, like a montage of the year 1969, and we can see the progression of that and what it was like for people to go off to war in this time. Yeah. Also gives us a time frame, says PMB, by using concrete. Yeah. PMB says, watch concrete say, and that's the way it is. I struggle with that, comma or no comment. Yeah, this is one of those lines there could be a few ways to do it. You could make this, pull this out into quotes, and then you have a comma. You could have a comma, and then italicize this. But then, some people if you look at what's his name, the Cormac McCarthy. Has this very stripped down way of including dialogue where it becomes part of the speaker too. And I think that's what this part does. Anyway, let's keep going though. Sundays we went to Mass, to 10 o'clock Mass, dipped hands in holy water, genuflected. So we have again, like the fingering the rosary beads, we dip hands in holy water, and how you can feel the water, the coolness of that, the wetness. It's a tangible image, and it has the sense of feeling as well. So we're really entering this montage of scenes, this little timeline. Genuflected, walked down the aisle, and received communion. Cleon Jones got down on one knee, caught the last out, and the Mets won the World Series. It's not just the Mets won the World Series. We're listing things that happened. We could just say that, but we bring up the image of Cleon Jones. And if you follow baseball, you might know that video. But even if not, it's some guy dropping to his knee, which of course goes back to the genuflecting and the religious iconography that's throughout the poem. It's almost like he's praying as he makes the last catch, which is another detail too. But we get to see all that. And then we get to the real, this is just such great details here. 2 white-gloved Marines rang the bell, stood in our stoop. They're just not Marines, they're white-gloved Marines. Again, we zoom in on one specific detail to bring the whole scene to life. It's such a great thing to do, to bring poems to life. You zoom in on specificity. It's all specificity brings all the emotion with it, because that's how we enter a space. And we can, when you're looking at the world, you're looking at about the size of a thumbnail at arm's length. That's what you're actually seeing clearly at any time. And our eyes dart around, and we build this map of what the world is that we think we're living in space that we can see. But really, it's just the world, us knowing what's changed, what we're looking at. And we make this map, this like 3-dimensional thing that we're living in. And it's that one little thumbnail detail over and over again, here and here and here and here, that make our entire world. And that's how it works with poems too. So that's why it's the white-gloved Marines. And without the white gloves, that's what brings it to life, or the white gloves. 2 white-gloved Marines ring the bell, stood on our stoop. My father watched their car pull away, then locked the wooden door. I went to our room, climbed in the top bunk. And, even that detail, it's specific for what I'm doing, but it shows some of the, we share a bedroom. I'm in the top bunk. He was the bottom. Or I guess he was the top bunk. I was the bottom because it's his pillow. But pounded a hard ball into his pillow. My mother found her Bible. Took out my brother's letters, put them in the pocket of her blue robe. Again, it's not just her robe, not put them in her pocket, not took out his letters, but put them in the pocket of her blue robe. Again, that's one of those little thumbnail details. That make the whole world come to life. My father started Johnny's car, revved the engine until every tool hanging in the garage shook. And there's that, just the emotion that comes out of that detail. Like we are the whole world that's shaking as those tools shake, as like the catastrophic loss all the people in the scene in this timeline are trying to deal with. And we get to feel that through the shaking of the tools. It doesn't say, and his tears filled the the door panel or whatever. It doesn't say that my mother wept. It gives the details and lets us feel the feelings, and that's just the way that really great writing works. It's not some rule that you're told in writing class. It's the way that our minds as human beings function. They're human universals. Our brains are set up this way. And so playing on that, taking advantage of the way your readers' brains are actually structured and how they respond to things is how you make good writing. And so having these concrete details, not saying the generic, general, vague thing, not explaining what you're talking about. He never says anything about what it's about, really. He doesn't say anything about the grief that he's writing about. He only lets the images do the speaking for him. And that's really what we mean when the fundamental first day writing workshop advice is show, don't tell. We mean give us concrete details and let us enter them, feel them as tangible, real space that we're occupying, and then have the things happen within there where we can feel the actual emotions that are going on within the poem or within the piece of writing, whatever it is. It doesn't even matter. And that's just how to do it. Okay, well, that is my lecture for the day. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Hope that was helpful. Thanks, everybody who shared their work. Really, our goal is just to help, to make us all better writers and readers and get to enjoy our experiences more. Really glad to have all of you here. And thanks to, especially, if this wouldn't be fun or wouldn't work if it weren't for so many people joining us every week, participating, and sharing their thoughts in the comments. It's really, if it was just me lecturing all the time and pontificating about poetry, it wouldn't be nearly as fun or meaningful or useful as it is when all of you are out here talking about these poems too. So thanks you for all of our regular viewers. Really appreciate it. All right, so that's going to wrap up the critique of the week for this week. Now, let's see. Coming up on the Rattlecast, this week's guest is going to be our very own Katie Dozier. Now, Katie Dozier does have 2 poems in Rattle before I really knew her, and before she became editor, before she became my wife. And she has a new book, which is a really powerful and important book for the poetry world to think about. And so we're going to have her as the guest. Her book is Residency Review, a memoir in verse. It chronicles her experience last summer at an MFA low residency program. And, there's sort of if we did, content warnings, there's some, it involves sexual assault and things like that, and the response to it. But it's a complicated and important book, and so we're going to share it on the Rattlecast Monday, August 17th. The prompt for this week, Katie's prompt, is to, let me pull it up. Hang on. It had to do with shelf life, which was a great episode. If you missed Hemmett's episode on Monday, definitely check that out. Hemmett's book is called Shelf Life. The prompt, sort of inspired by that from Katie, is write a poem about something you've kept on a shelf for far too long. What have you kept on a shelf for far too long? Write about that. That's your prompt for this week. The guest, once again, our very own Katie Dozier, Rattlecast 354, this Monday, August 17th, the regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you there. Hope you have a great week. In the meantime, we'll talk to you later. Goodbye.